internet. Gino, that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens. Welcome to the cycling edition of Deep Listens. We are going to be talking about Dust and Elysian Tale while I burn some calories on this stationary bike. And I'm joined, as always, by Billy the Nimbat Rothert.
Oh, man. All right.
That's a legacy to live up to.
I suppose if I had to be one character or race from Dust and Elysian Tale, I would want to be the most broken, overpowered character in that whole game. So, yeah, I'll take that. Hi, everyone. My name is Billy Rothert, a.k.a. Rothgar. I picked this game, and I'm pretty excited to talk about it. This game satisfied all of my needs except one, but we'll definitely get to that at some point.
And we are also joined, as always, by Pete, the Floating Sword Busby.
That's a good one. I'll take Floating Sword. Hello, everybody.
Floating Sword.
Right. Hello, everybody. Excited to talk about the game. I will say, just right off the bat, I'm not a furry, but if I were, I think this game would also have satisfied all of my needs, because there are some very attractive animals in it.
Yep.
Yep.
Not touching that.
I'm open with that point. I think it's important to highlight.
First thing out the gate.
Very attractive animals. Like, we're not talking Zootopia level attractive, but still pretty good looking.
All right, with that great reminder, thank you, Pete. Just a reminder to our listeners that you can get in touch with the show at Deep Listens Pod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com, or deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Remember to subscribe to the show. It makes us have more listeners, and we like that.
We do.
Other important thing about that, we had feedback from our Zombie Pie episode, and I agreed to bring some of it here.
God.
Billy, if you could go to the comments section of the Mobius Final Fantasy episode, because I cannot pull it up right now, because I'm on a stationary bike.
Why would I do that?
Is it about Roman numerals? Because I can explain those.
No, it's not.
Okay.
The Romans just couldn't envision a world where you needed more than 50.
No. Well, it goes from L, and then C, and then M.
Then you're fucked.
Then you're done. Then you're
all right.
Can you read this?
I will read
Read
this.
this amazing comment.
I'm just
because I
gonna
need
read,
Pete's reaction to it.
I'm just going to read it as is.
If someone is listening and you heard our Final Fantasy X podcast, our part 2 of Final Fantasy X, you will have heard this email, but I felt that we had other relevant experts on this pod to respond to this. Not Billy.
Oh, like me then.
All right, go ahead, Billy.
Okay, here we go. This is a comment from our good friend and avid listener, NJ for Life.
How's life spelled?
Lyfe.
Of course.
Thank you.
Goes without saying.
I wanted to send this email to the Final Fantasy crew rather than the normal cadre of podcast hosts. Thanks, asshole. I am a long time Jerseyan, spelled kind of like Super Saiyan, who takes umbrage with your views on the Brooklyn Nets. They have plenty of talent, just waiting to play a complete season healthy. There's no telling what Jeremy Lin will be able to do once healthy. Also, there's no denying how much Karis LeVert has improved in the last year. Yeah, I get everyone thinks the Kevin Garnett, sure. Paul Pierce trade is a hindrance, but they still have 2 first-round picks! ! I mean, the 76ers have rolled the dice on draft picks the past 5 years, and look where that's gotten them. Another explanation. Plus, they have money to spend, and there's no telling how many players are excited to play with Jeremy Lin as the Nets rebuild. So, once again, I love the podcast, but I think your criticism of the Nets is entirely misplaced. They had a bad season, sure, but it was a byproduct of injuries and nothing else. First of all, I respect all the basketball things that was compacted into one sentence. I don't fucking know what any of this means.
I'm really starting to think the Brooklyn Nets are just a money laundering scheme for Prokhorov. Like, he's trying to make his oligarch money disappear, and the Brooklyn Nets are the way he's doing it.
That wouldn't surprise me. So is that your whole take on whether Jeremy Lin, players are going to be excited to play with Jeremy Lin and leave other contracts?
To play with Jeremy Lin.
You don't think that the Nets are maybe in a worse position than the 76ers?
Look, don't get me started on the Sixers. Look, let's give props to our boy NJ for life for backing his team. It's admirable. It's laudable.
Is it?
Yeah, you got to back your hometown squad, even when they're a heaving dumpster fire.
Look, the New Jersey Swamp Dragons will not be besmirched. I just thought I should read that. Is there any way we could just read that email every podcast at the beginning?
I feel
Brooke Lopez is your best player, and he gets 6 rebounds a game as a starting center.
That's not the intro we're looking for
I know it isn't, but I kind of want to. There's like a podcast that just watches the same Adam Sandler movie over and over and over again. I just want to keep reading this email until it stops making me laugh.
I'm not saying that this isn't the podcast
I think it's grown-ups too.
Intro that we're looking for, but it might be the one that we need.
Yes, it's not the podcast intro. It's the podcast intro we deserve.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Fuck. Okay.
All right, so let's talk about Dust and Elysian Tale.
An Elysian Tale.
All right. So, I picked this game for a couple reasons. One, it was in my Steam library. I love being able to pick a game that I actually want to talk about, and it also crosses off a backlog in my Steam library. I use most of the picks on this show that are mine to play a game that I'm actually really excited to get my hands on, but I haven't had a good chunk of time to cut out to devote to it. But every once in a while I like to bring something academic to the table, and this particular game was made almost entirely by one person. Dean Dodrell was the creative mind behind Dust and Elysian Tale, according to general Google searching and Wikipedia and shit like that. The game was made almost entirely by Dean Dodrell, and things like voice acting and some music were added by other players, but basically all the coding and art was done by a single person. It took almost 4 years to make the game. So besides being a game of genre and style that I like, this is also a pretty cool game to see what a person can do with enough passion project motivation behind them. So without further ado, let's jump into this story. The general style of Dust and Elysian Tale is like an action-adventure game, Metroidvania style. And in the beginning of the game, we're introduced to our protagonist, Dust, who awakens in a nameless forest situation, doesn't know who he is or what he's doing, amnesia situation. Amnesia protagonist inserted into the beginning of the story. We're met immediately.
Lazy.
We're met immediately by this flying sword named the Blade of Ara, and a flying squirrel reminiscent of Tails from Sonic the Hedgehog.
Named Fidget. So, Fidget... Damn it, Fidget.
And the Blade of Ara...
I like Fidget.
Give a brief introduction to what's going on here. The Blade of Ara is a magical sword that sort of awoken in response to Dust's presence, and decided to meet up with Dust, go on some adventure to find out more about Dust's past, who this person is, why they're sort of in this unconscious state. We learn all the reasons why throughout the game, but our story takes place in a fictional world. You go from the sort of glade start of the game to Aurora Village, where you meet the denizens of this world, and you get a little bit more intro into the story. But generally, it's your pretty typical proceed through levels, hack and slash through monsters, Metroidvania style game. Some other story components are then launched from this point, but this is the general intro of what this game's about. We're going to look for the reasons why Dust doesn't have any memory, who he actually is, and discover some other things about the place that we're playing this game in.
Kill some monsters along the way. Why not?
Kill lots of them. Mm-hmm. So, one of the interesting things about the gameplay of Dust is that while it is a Metroidvania game, it does actually use discrete level loads. unlike games like Castlevania Symphony of the Night or Metroid, rather than just kind of passing through doorways and things and kind of continuing on this gigantic map, there are several sub-levels in Dust that are connected by loading screens and a world map. But once you get onto each of those levels, you kind of Metroidvania your way around. But on top of having those loads, there is a Metroidvania style of getting additional abilities that make backtracking more fruitful. You start getting access to places you could not get to before. So instead of just kind of running all the way back through all these levels, you generally have to like fight your way back to the world map and then load into another place and then fight your way all the way back and then get the 1 or 2 new things you can get in that area, which I found to be like an understandable tweak since this game was made by one person. Like, I'm sure that memory considerations and loads and stuff like that were a real problem, but it made the game a little bit more chopped up, or it did not have the sense of cohesion that I usually is kind of the calling card of this genre, at least in my opinion.
I see your point, because I definitely felt the pain of wanting to backtrack and feeling like, gosh, it's going to take me more time than needed to get what I really want. Now, aside from the obvious counterpoint, which is I'm the grandfather, and I don't give a shit about how far I have to backtrack or how difficult it may be. Aside from that, there is an item in the game that facilitates this. It's a consumable item. It does cost in-game money, and it lets you basically teleport to the world map from any of multiple locations scattered throughout the level that are basically your auto-save points. And that
it's basically an escape rope.
Yeah, it's basically an escape rope from Pokemon, but it has to be used at a couple specific locations. But they're plentiful within each level. I will say that money actually kind of matters in this game. Like, they're never... Like, I didn't get to a point where I was so filthy rich that I didn't have to worry about money ever. I could have, maybe, but I didn't want to grandfather that particular stat. It was kind of a boring stat, watching money go up. But I did have to be wise with my resources, and so I ended up buying a lot of those teleport things, but not until, like, the second half of the game.
Yeah, I think that the teleporty stuff is it's a good way to deal with the problem that they had with the loading, but it still felt like a half measure. And like Castlevania Symphony of the Night gets around this problem of backtracking by having discrete teleport rooms kind of strewn throughout the castle, and it handles that kind of warping around. Whereas this game felt like it had basically one extra layer thrown in the middle in the form of the world map. I mean, it wasn't a huge thing. It was just a little polished detail that I noticed.
I mean, it's magnified by the genre, too. I mean, if this were, backtracking issues in a game, like, one of the largest points of these sort of Metroidvania games is the backtracking. So obviously that flaw is magnified when you're working within this genre.
I think this could have been pretty easily resolved by a simple, like, start menu, go back to the world map availability. Now, I don't know how the gaming programming works beside that, but it seemed like that's all you did. You just did it from specifically a save point. And I don't imagine it would be that much harder to make it work from any spot in the world map. So it makes me think that it must have been some kind of design choice. Like you shouldn't have. I'm not saying that. Maybe Dodgerel wanted it to be kind of difficult to just leave any particular world. He wanted it to be maybe something that's not as accessible in the early game.
Yeah, you don't want it to be like a combat out either. Like, oh man, this boss is kicking my ass. Let me just bounce back to the world map.
It shouldn't be a combat out.
Yeah.
Sure. Now, when it comes to the actual combat itself, I found that this game was one of the more it felt broken. I don't know if it was broken, but it felt. And by broken, I don't mean like it was bad combat. I mean, I felt overpowered very quickly.
Fidget's just bringing the hammer.
Yeah, Fidget just messes everything up. Yeah. I don't know about you guys. So you can upgrade 5 different stats when you start the game. Your health, 4 different stats. Your health, your attack, your defense, and your Fidget power.
Yeah, Fidget basically has magic attacks. You get more as the game progresses. So,
yes.
They're mostly projectiles.
So there's 2 basic attacks that Dust has. It's basically regular attack, and then
Cut Fools.
Yeah, just regular basic attack, and then what would normally be considered heavy attack, but if you hold it, it becomes Dust Storm.
You just spin your sword.
And apparently lets you fly, too.
Yeah.
So, also lets you fly.
So if you think, and sort of reminiscent of a game like God of War, for example, fantastic game, they have a simple sort of like 2-3 button combat system where you can mix light and heavy attacks in different patterns to generate specific combos. That happens here. That part of combat is great for the first 3 minutes of the game, and then you get Dust Storm. And then you just
use Dust Storm. Yeah, that's all you need.
Yeah, so Dust Storm, the thing about Dust Storm is Fidget, the Nimbat, she spits projectiles, depending on, like, you get different types of projectiles as you progress through the game, but they're kind of a joke when you just shoot her projectile. It's like 3 little shitty projectiles that just have a really bad arc, and they hit almost nothing. But when you Dust Storm them, you spin your blade and it creates a vacuum that pulls the attacks in. And then if those like fireballs stay in your spinny blade for long enough, they multiply into like fucking 20 heat-seeking projectiles that just destroy everything.
You build a bullet hell using a sword and a Nimbat.
And you are the bullet hell.
Yeah.
So that's what you get with the first Fidget projectile. At some points in the game later, you get a fire-based projectile. When that gets fed through the blender, you can basically fill 3/4 of the screen with hot pillars of death.
Yes.
Everything
that extend up and down as basically as high as the screen goes. So
it hits people off screen.
Yeah, so my favorite thing to do in this game was to just like enter a screen that seemed like it was maybe I was gonna have to jump a little bit, just shoot the fire out, do the Dust Storm, and then just see money rain down from above me and experience. I was like, I knew you were up there.
And now you're dead.
Then you get the lightning one, and then it's game
Oh,
on.
God.
Because the lightning one is also kind of pitiful when you use it by itself, but then you throw it through Dust Storm, and it's just a... what do you call it when, like...
Chain lightning.
It's basically just chain lightning through the whole screen, but there's like a special word in like Halo where the sniper rifle doesn't actually have a projectile. It's like a cursor.
It's a hit scan.
It's basically a hit scan on any enemy on the screen.
Yeah,
the flood?
No, not the floods. It like arcs into one enemy.
The Arbiter?
Oh, you mean
the Grave Mind? Or what is it?
The Prophet?
Yelling down.
Silent Prophet? You hit one thing with electricity, and then lightning bounces off of them and hits everything else on screen, and they all get drawn together into one horrible death pile. And then you just keep doing it. You just keep doing it.
The next piece is you can fucking do that shit while you're flying through the air.
Yeah, you never have to land.
You never have to land.
Not only do you kill everybody, it's basically impossible for you to get hit.
Now, there is a drawback. There is a limitation to this.
Sure.
There is a limitation. You do have to consume mana, or effectively mana, to use Fidget's projectile. So this Dust Storm combination, it costs a resource that is easy to replenish, but is not unlimited. So you can't do it forever.
You wait like 2 seconds, and then it replenishes enough to do it again.
Technically, you can also overheat.
Yeah, you can overheat in Dust Storm.
Long before you overheat.
Yeah. So, Dust Storm, if you just sit there and Dust Storm for like 8 seconds, you'll overheat and you'll take a non-damaging hit that will break your combo.
But who cares?
If you just sit there and wait...
That one kid.
If you just sit there and wait, then Fidget's mana will very, very slowly regen, but if you just deal any basic attack to an enemy, it gives you like 20% of the max bar back, so you just do a couple basic attacks pretty easily, and you're full mana again. So this seems broken
because it is.
It seems broken because it is. And it's broken specifically on the normal first playthrough of the game.
Yes.
That ability and that skill was just balanced one way, and it was for like the hardest mode of the game.
I will say, for as unbalanced as it is very fun to just nuke everything always.
Yeah.
It's visually pretty strong when you see, 50 bullets flying through the air chasing things down.
Yeah. Now, we're kind of just let's just break apart combat because we just started talking about this. It's one of the most salient in your face parts of the game is the combat. So, in each level, there are mobs and mobs of enemies. Some are weak, some are specialized. Mostly they're just hordes of weak enemies that have bad attack frames and they just are trying to outnumber you. Every once in a while there are specific enemies that you have to deal with in a specific way, but they're kind of few and far between. And each level as the game progresses, you have basically the same setup, but the enemies change. It's not just a reskin or a recolor, it is a new model, but the formula is still the same. So that was a little bit boring. I think I was left just slightly wanting more in the realm of basic enemy changes, but some of the unique enemies were pretty cool. Earlier in the game we had giants that were just kind of slow and hit hard. First third of the game we get enemies that are really good at blocking, so you have to parry them. You'll end up getting enemies that are sort of magic users, in the second third of the game, and you can't hit them with physical attacks, you have to use fidget, but that's great because you only want to use fidget anyway, so you just blow them up like everything else. And then towards the later part of the game, you get invisible enemies, and you get enemies that are just really, really good at straight up hand-to-hand combat, so they'll parry you, and you can't just run into them with fidget on because they may be just in a perpetual hurt box of tornado and death. So there's some enemies that you have to actually pay attention to later in the game, but for the first maybe 2/3 of the game, you're just a hot death vortex that flies through all the levels. That, I think, was I was left wanting a little bit more. How do you guys feel about the first 2/3 of the game combat?
So I'm going to be honest here. I only played the first 2/3 because I had to take a trip in the middle of this, or several trips. So my big thing was that I found, because the dust storm in the air causes you to fly and basically home in on any enemies that are in the air, I could just, in a level where there were flying things, jump, do the dust storm, and then fly out of the screen. Use the upward momentum to carry me over all the actual enemies and into the next screen. And I enjoyed that immensely. Just not playing, when I wasn't having to fight all these stupid mobs, because they respawn every time you move screens. All the enemies respawn, which was kind of annoying.
Fantastic for grinding. Fantastic for grinding.
I enjoyed being able to dash through them or fly over them. So that was pretty great. This game's real loose.
I would echo, not Gino's, the flying was fine, I guess. But I think, Billy, you're right that there's not a level of strategy inherent in the combat. You get these combos, but there's really no reason to use them much beyond just sort of clicking until you get to those creatures that can parry you back. So yeah, I think if you had more, if you needed to use individual combos for enemies and they would change battle efficacy beyond just sort of increasing damage output, it would have been better served that way.
Yeah, and they don't necessarily even change the configurations of enemies all that much. For the first 2/3 of the game, there are a lot of just mobs of dum-dums.
It's just hordes, yeah.
Hordes of dum-dums that die in 2 or 3 hits per dude, and so you're really just optimizing how do I hit as many of these people at the same time. And so a lot of the combos, because they involve longer animations that he's really going to hit this one hard, it makes it less efficient than just filling the air with hot fidget death.
And I think this isn't so much a restriction of what enemy types were available, but I think, and we have to give credit where it's due, this was made by effectively one person, so there's not a whole dev team behind this, but yeah, I think that
absolutely
what I'm missing from this is other ways to interact. I don't know, I'm having a hard time expressing this. Yeah, the first 2/3 of the game, you have mobs that you just blow up with hot fire and death. But the last third of the game was kind of refreshing and new. Because I was dealing with threats like invisible enemies. I was dealing with threats like enemies that were just perpetual hurt boxes so you couldn't just fly through them. I was dealing with enemies that were able to parry me. And my point just came back to me now. I think this game was limited. Sorry, this combat was limited because of how few things you could take away from Dust. The simplicity of Dust's combat made it difficult to take things away from Dust, and that's, I think, one of the ways that you can make combat more interesting. So you only had basic attack, which you can't really take away. Then there's Dust Storm and Fidget. And they implemented a silence mechanic that would silence Fidget, just like silence would do in any other game where magic is used. And that was effective at making me change combat. But that was the only way it would make me change combat. And they can't just spam silence in every single level. That would get boring and repetitive too. Maybe if they introduced like a maim mechanic and said I can't use Dust Storm for a while, maybe some enemies make me not able to use Dust Storm. Some enemies maybe don't let me use Fidget. Some enemies make me, I don't know. But there's so few ways to hinder Dust because his combat is so simple. If you hindered it, there'd be nothing left.
I mean, I think one of the things they could have done was have the enemies shoot more, because
maybe more projectiles.
A lot of the time. But I think that that's a double-edged sword, because when you're filling the screen with so many of your own projectiles, it's very hard to track what else is going on because it's so busy. And I think that it was kind of a victim of its central design decision of making the Dust Storm so key. Mm-hmm. Because once you make that decision, it means you can't have a lot of projectiles, because then it's hard to track. It also means that you've got this effect that is most visually impressive and feels the best when you're up against mobs. And so it skews you towards having mobs. But mobs as a design also, if you make those mobs too smart or if you make them too efficient, it can feel really, really lame to just be getting beaten up from all sides by a group of enemies.
It's also
want them dumb.
It's also a problem that's exacerbated by a story decision to make what's effectively your only weapon a main character, right? So Dust can't gain new arms. Like, he's not going to suddenly start wielding a battle axe or something, because his central character is his talking sword. So like Billy was talking about the simplicity, that's exacerbated by the decision to make Dust's weapon also a character.
Yeah, and they try to introduce a little bit of variety in the different elemental blasts from Fidget, but ultimately the differences are so minor when they're all so powerful.
Yeah.
Now, I think if I were to like workshop a way to make the combat, I shouldn't say fix, because it is very fun and simple and clean. I don't want to say fix, but add a new layer. It would be introducing an enemy type that was perhaps magic immune. That lets me still have Fidget and still have Dust Storm, but maybe that particular combat is just rendered completely ineffective against them. And if you pepper in some sort of serious, like, elite enemies, think about it like this. If we talk about Mark of the Ninja for a second, there were some enemies that were, like, immune to some of your ninja tricks. You had to approach them differently or evade them. That was an introduction of an enemy type that made you change how you played the game. You couldn't just walk up and neck snap everybody, because those guys it wouldn't work on. Adding an enemy type that forced you to stop using that technique because you had to deal with them in another way made you have a choice. Okay, well, do I just Dust Storm until they're the only ones left? Do I deal with them first and hope that the mob doesn't swarm me? Maybe make something bad happen if you use your Dust Storm. Maybe that particular enemy type multiplies if they get hit by magic. That would be a way for you to have to make some kind of meaningful choice in combat of what do I prioritize first. There was really no priority in combat here. It was just everything on the screen dies in kind of the same way.
Yeah, and I think if they had, I think that that's a pretty good idea. Just like if you just had one enemy that was magic immune, then you all of a sudden have to juggle keeping the screen full of hot death with dealing with this one enemy that is immune to it. And so you wouldn't be able to just, like, for me, it was just a matter of how will I keep this spam going? There's an enemy about to hit me. I'm going to dodge out of the way, and then I'm going to keep the spam going. And it would just deal with everything. Or if there was just an enemy that wasn't stunned by the dust storm.
Yeah, like it didn't flinch.
Yeah, every enemy was simultaneously damaged and completely immobilized by it. Like, if you hit them with the right dust storm, they would just be completely ineffectual and dying.
That changes in later difficulties. Sorry, not in later parts of the game, but in higher difficulties, they don't flinch as much. So it was thought about. It was implemented in some part of the game, but I feel like this game needs to be played. Like, we probably all played on normal difficulty, but there are hard modes, and I think anybody should just pick up this game the first time and just play on hard mode, because it'll actually probably be more combat interesting on hard mode, because it's, like we're saying, it's just harder. I played the game on I got maybe a third of the way through the game on like whatever godlike mode it was, and I had become basically an expert on how to play this game, and I was struggling through the combat because the enemies just hit harder and have tons more health, and they're smarter, better AI and stuff.
This game also seems like it's rife for when the difficulty gets pushed up. A lot of those design decisions that are kind of funny, like taking out a bunch of mobs with just fireballs everywhere, that probably gets real frustrating when the difficulty gets, just like you dial up the numbers, like higher health, higher damage.
Dialing up the numbers was a little bit of what they did, but it made me have to use that light, heavy attack chains, actually. Like, those actually became relevant again, because that was one of the only ways you could immobilize an enemy. Is because if you get them caught up in an actual combo, then they're immobilized, but like the dust storm stuff didn't immobilize them as much. So there was actually maybe a key enemy that I wanted to catch them in a combo and do like a finisher on. Now, once Fidget got strong, that again became irrelevant, but we had like the inkling of the combat that we really wanted coming out. And it happened in the first third of the game on like the ultra hard setting, but then it wasn't, it was again overshadowed by how I leveled up Fidget. I think we want to go in, at least I do, I want to go into the level up mechanics here, because I kind of liked them.
Yeah, can we do that real quick and then get into story? Because a lot of the level up mechanics, they seemed very deep, but they also seemed like in normal mode, they straight didn't matter a lot of the time. Everything was going to die just based on your dust storm.
Yeah. So you had 4 stats you could level up, and they put a restriction on it that your highest stat could be at most 4 points higher than your lowest stat. So you couldn't just slam all your points into attack or slam all your points into Fidget. You had to have some kind of balance. What I did, and you guys can tell me what you did too, was I maximized attack and Fidget, and defense and health were 4 steps behind.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. We just pretty easily found out that offense was the way to go in this game, and defense didn't really matter that much. When I played on ultra hard mode, I put points into defense and health first, because I was getting one-shot by enemies. And so this is a bit of this dial up the numbers game maybe coming back to bite us, that the game was balanced so that the combat could work no matter what difficulty you were on, but the level up system and item system was changed to effectively create a different experience. So like, most of the items and equipment you get in this game, yeah, they do add like some kind of raw number of extra attack or extra defense or extra luck or whatever, but they also normally have like multipliers, and they stack multiplicatively. So if you have like 100 points in Fidget power, and you get a ×2 ring, it goes to 200. Then another ×2 ring, now you're at 400, and like these things could exponentially grow to wild numbers. I had my Fidget stats at like probably 15,000 by the end of the game, while my other stats are like a paltry, like 1, 2, 300.
Wait, are you telling me that the end result of this was you just min-maxing Fidget just the same, except you needed to worry about health like a little bit more?
No, because I had to. Well, the end of the story is I got all levels all maxed, so I maxed every stat. I got to the last. I got to level 60 in this game and got every single item in 117% of the game.
I don't think that's the moral here.
And just for the record, this game doesn't go to 100%; it goes to 117% completion. I got it.
Oh, so it does the upside down castle from Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Sort of. This game goes to 117.
Pete, I couldn't help but notice you put your hater blockers on. Did you have a point?
No, I just like wearing them. But I do have a point now that you bring it up. I like that you get experience for conversation. Because I will just not talk to NPCs a lot. Because screw them, they're boring. But it's a nice touch when you level up talking to somebody and then the screen explodes. And you're like, yes, personal interaction.
I didn't find any of these NPCs boring.
They're fine. They're just quest people.
Yeah.
Like, here, find my kid. There's a box. Just
collect materials for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the quest givers, I liked the experience for talking. I didn't like the things that people asked you to do.
Yeah.
Run and fetch kind of quests.
Pretty much.
My kid's on this screen that only exists so you can go there and collect him. Like, that was one of the weirdest things, was that in this Metroidvania game, almost all of the side quest related areas were basically 2 or 4, maybe 7 screens big, and the like full levels were almost,
30 to 50 screens big.
Yeah. They were very big. And so you ended up with this, like, this was clearly added on either later or it was created separately just to add a side quest system. Which I don't think is like, there's nothing inherently wrong. It's just a very different style of design that I'm not used to seeing. And, I think it speaks to this one person team that he was able to add this at all. Like, it's cool that it's there. I just didn't want to interact with it.
And there are some other areas in Metroidvania style games where this is used, but it's not felt as much here because there's a load screen for it. Sorry. It's felt more here because there's a load screen for it. It's not felt as much there because it's just completely continuous with the rest of the larger world. I'm thinking, for example, in Game of the Year winner Vault of Story Abyssal City, we had a level called The Pit, and it was just like a 2 or 3 screen window that led to a special boss fight. We also had The Hollow, which was like a 3 screen level that led to a special boss fight. These are all optional, but because they were part of the bigger world and had sort of a seamless transition into them, it didn't feel weird. I agree with Gino's point. Having a overworld map icon for it and like loading in and having just that to experience, that was weird.
Yep. So the story is actually pretty interesting. Unless, there's a crafting system in this game too, but I really didn't interact with it much.
No.
It's not really a crafting system, but I will say this was my favorite kind of item grinding. So essentially in this game, and I like what they did here, you search and you grind for the item one time. Once you get it, you sell it to the merchant, and the merchant just on a timer just ticks up more of these items for you.
Yeah, that was nice.
I didn't have to actually grind for items.
That was good.
And so that I really, really enjoyed. But what, Gino, thumbs down?
It was fine. I sold things to the guy, and then I could get more items, but I didn't need more. I didn't even unlock the person who crafts things. I just murdered.
But she flirts with you, and she's cute.
She's a she?
Yeah, she's a she. Well, she-fox, yeah.
I did not find a she-fox.
Here's my final point on this. Yes, I am the grind father. Yes, I like seeing numbers go up, and I like collecting things. But I also like it when a game says, hey, you've done a good job, now go back to playing the game. Like, the whole point of me being a grind father and liking to complete things and see numbers go up is because I want to do that and then get back to the game. And this game lets me have the satisfaction of collecting this item, grinding for these items for a while, and they let me finish that in a very concise way so that I can get back to the game.
I'm not sure if anything Billy just said was true, but he's describing himself, so I'm not willing to argue with him about it. Gino, the story.
Sorry.
So in the story, first, I want to have Tony Allen on this podcast someday so that Billy can say, I am the Grindfather, and then Tony Allen has to refute him.
Right. He just somehow reaches through the computer screen and throttles him with his bare hand.
Yep. And just says first team all defense, whispers it to him as he loses consciousness. But the story of this game is actually pretty interesting. Dust seems to be, and this gets revealed pretty early on, or hinted pretty early on, but spoilers. Seems like Dust is kind of an elite assassin, or like elite soldier of the mammalian army. There's two groups of furries. There are the mammals, the warm bloods, and then there are the moon bloods who seem to be cold blooded.
Reptiles, it seems like.
Snails,
yeah.
Lizards,
and frogs. But they are they were the underground frog people.
Oh, right.
I think they were frog people.
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Mudpot I don't think counts as moonbloods.
I think they were moon bloods, but they were underground, so no one genocided them.
All right, fair enough.
But when I said that, I mean, like, the whole central problem here is that the mammals seem to have a king or a leader who is genocidal and predisposed to hating the Moonbloods, and so he wants to wipe them off the face of the earth.
Is there ever an explanation for, like, the impetus for this genocide, like, beyond
No.
just they're different?
No, there's not. It's one of my biggest rubs with the game story. We don't get a reason. We confront the game's protagonist, and we don't get a reason.
Antagonist.
We get a loose bullshit reason, but it's never directly connected to the motives of the game's antagonist. The game's antagonist is a General Gaius who doesn't look intimidating at all to be the game's.
No, he seems like a pretty nice
a fucking
guy.
furry.
Beyond the genocide part.
Yeah, beyond the genocide part.
Yeah, he's cute.
He's very cute.
Smiles a lot.
He just kind of has like a sweet, humble face. Doesn't even have like an eye scar kind of thing. Like, just give him like one of those like vertical eye scars. Like, we'd be good. But no, not. Anyway, General Gaius is the game's antagonist, the war leader on this genocidal march, and we get from the Moonblood like elders that sometime in ancient history they had this great civilization with this special connection to magic, and they just tell us that, but also General Gaius wants to genocide them all, and it wasn't really directly tied to any of this, but we get some kind of reason for why this race was significant, but we really don't get it fleshed out at all.
Yeah, all you really get is you get the accounts of like the first boss you meet, who apparently all of the mobs you've been killing are his children, and you kill all of his kids, and then he goes insane and tries to kill you with fire, and then he tells you that one of the mammalian girls was like
Ginger.
A buddy of his. Yeah, Ginger was a friend of his when they were growing up, and then you go speak to Ginger, she's like, you killed Fuse, he was a good boy. Why'd you do that? And you're like, because he tried to kill me and all of us.
And she's like, oh, cool.
Oh.
Got it.
Well, and he must have been insane. You did what you had to do. This game, it's trying so hard. Like, it's got its heart in the right place.
Yep.
The scene in Mudpot where you try to save this like kid's dad, I thought was surprisingly well done.
It got me.
Yeah, but look, I was out on Mudpot
Immediately.
The second they had southern accents.
Yeah, as soon as that happened, I was like, why
it's the poor underground tribe with their southern accents, okay.
And they're underground, so they're in the deep south.
Yeah. I'm like, why?
But their names are Flo Hop and Smobop.
Yeah, he has a whacking stick that
And
he goes
old
around
Gappy.
whacking people with. Like, the whole thing is just like a gross caricature.
Yeah, as soon as I saw him and his overalls, I was like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a southern accent, and you're gonna make me feel.
I'm gonna make Paul proud of me.
Oh God. Yeah, like it was an affecting scene, but I couldn't get back into their whole subplot.
Take care of Mama.
But
Be
when
the
he
man
asks,
Paul wanted me to be.
he asks you to get snow and bring it to Pa so that Pa can see snow. I didn't do that side quest, but I kind of wanted to.
Actually, if you do that side quest, it just gets really deep really fast. Like, there's like a whole sequence of Flowbop or whatever the fuck his name was, saying like he went for a walk with his dad after his death through the snow, but he knew he was dead, but it was meaningful and impactful to him. Like the screen goes black and it's just that kid's face, and it gets really, really in your face really fast.
Like I said,
should have got that kid some snow.
This game's heart is in the right place. It's it's just the broadest strokes.
Yeah, that same sort of like between the I hate saying the name, between the mood bloods and the mammals. I guess they even have names. Are they just warm bloods?
Furries.
You get that same sort of like tech magic dichotomy where like the warm bloods try to wipe out this sort of like primitive, closer to the earth, magical tribe through the use of, let's basically say, Western technology. Again,
and
it's
the
sort
technology
of like
was derived from their own magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does some Avatar stuff.
Yeah.
You end up having spears versus gunships at the end of the game.
Yeah, it's all a little... You're right, Gino. It all is a little Avatar.
Well, I didn't see the whole end of the game. There was a section where it became a haunted house game, and that was kind of funny.
Yeah,
it was a zombie section. Cool. Yeah, I wasn't prepared for the zombie section. But what happens... I only got up to the zombie houses.
You didn't get the big reveal?
What's the big reveal? Is Dust... Was he an elite assassin boy?
Was he?
So, we find out Dust's true nature.
Oh, no.
After the... So, like, just in general, you wake up in the forest, you go to Aurora Village, meet the people, start fighting monsters, get upgrades to Fidget, get stronger, go to the haunted house people. You're all the time learning more and more about whose Dust's history is. You're getting snippets of story from General Gaius on his war campaign, talking about a character named Cassius, but they're referring to Dust by a new name.
Referring,
like, this is his old
that.
person. So you kind of have this instinct that Dust was somebody before the events of the present game, and very big. You get that from an opening prologue sequence.
I mean, you had to be. But.
Yeah, you're just cutting fools in the opening prologue,
just slaughtering village people. And so you end up following Ginger north to where the Moonbloods supposedly are. When you get there, Dust starts having these flashbacks like he's been there before, like whatever, and you meet the Elder, who then reveals to you Dust's true nature. Dust was formed when that elite soldier, Cassius, killed Ginger's younger brother, Jin, who in turn somehow dealt a killing blow to Dust, and they died at the same time.
Well, Cassius and Jin died at the same time.
Right. Yeah, sorry. Cassius and Jin simultaneously struck killing blows on one another. A little bit weird that this master assassin slaughtering entire armies dies like a farm boy with a knife, but whatever, we'll let it go. They die at the same time. Their souls get tangled up, and Dust is formed by this like merging of two souls.
Yeah, the Moonblood people use their magic to create Dust, because what they want is the power of Cassius, his strength, and the innocence of Jin. So they create Dust, this soul hybrid, to end the war.
And is that how does that mean the Sword and Fidget come from the Moonbloods?
Yeah, their job is to make sure Dust walks the true path.
Yeah.
Fidget's job is just to guard the sword. And the Sword's job is to make sure Dust walks the true path and doesn't succumb to any of his natures, I guess.
Evil killy powers. Okay.
The quote from the game, I think, was that we needed Cassius's power tempered by Jin's purity and good nature.
Yeah.
And throughout the whole game, Dust is conflicted, and you get these snippets, these little moments of where Dust, though you really don't get to make that much character choice, you get to make a little bit of character choice. But I think there's only one instance of actual character choice. And it's during a side quest, you go fetch some asshole's laundry, and you have an opportunity to throw a bunch of poison ivy in it or not.
I put poison ivy in it, because fuck that guy.
Yeah, that guy was
fuck that guy, but that was part of like a moral choice, and I think if you were to finish the game, like they would mention that later as part of your moral choice. You do get to make some conversation choices too, but I have a feeling, though I didn't explore them all, that they're kind of like a Walking Dead or Telltale game where like there's like the illusion of choice and it all just comes back to the main narrative. But
my dust was hard but fair.
Yeah, you get this theory that we need Cassius's power, we need Jin's purity and innocence to create the right balance of strength and good nature.
So, just sort of footnoting the ending, long story short, Jin leads the rebellion, fights the general. The general ends up dangling from a cliff, right, as everybody seems to do.
In a volcano.
Right. Dust crawls over, grabs his hand, and the general basically says, like, I forgive you, I'm sorry, yada, yada, yada. Pushes away from Dust, falls in the volcano and dies. Dust is too injured to escape the volcano. He comes down, he has a heartfelt moment with Fidget. Fidget leaves. He gets literally engulfed by lava. A tidal wave of lava comes and just wipes Dust off the screen. Then moments later it's revealed, is he dead? ? Probably not. He survived somehow.
Ashes to ashes.
Dust to dust.
Dust to dust.
That's the ending.
Yeah, kind of.
This game makes me conflicted. I want to like it so much. It's such a heartfelt thing. Like, playing it is entertaining, but
it's just tropes.
It's painting, it's a lot of tropes, and it's painting with really broad brushes. It's evoking a lot of genres and a lot of emotions and a lot of storylines that it can't really deliver on in a satisfactory manner. And I again applaud the developer for going for all those things in the first place and for trying something different and for experimenting with this very, I think, extreme design for combat. Like, it's really, really goes for it with the dust storm and the fidget and all that stuff. But I think ultimately it doesn't come together in a way that I loved.
And just from an ontological perspective, how do you combine souls? Souls
Have you seen Dragon Ball Z?
Yeah, I've seen Dragon Ball Z. But even then, like, the question remains the same. Like, souls are monads. Like, they can't be chopped up and combined.
They can't be chopped and screwed?
Like a physical question where, like, all right, it's just brain waves, we're going to take half and half. Then you're not really combining any sort of souls. You're just creating a new person.
Well, don't they just kind of create a new person with, like, the strength of one dude and then the...
Yeah, but they want it both
asshole
ways, right? Like, they want to have this question like, ooh, is he Cassius? Is he Jin? No, he's Dust. But, like, then they're arguing, oh, his true nature as Cassius is coming out. No, it can't, because he has no relationship to Cassius. Because souls are monadological, you've just taken personality traits.
My phone is dying, so I trust you. My phone is...
All right, Gino had a brief phone issue.
We'll continue that.
Yeah,
I don't think
we will just continue on.
The monadology of souls, anyway.
Probably not, honestly. So, if I had to make one defense, and not just because I picked the game, but because of sort of where the developer came from, where the developer's journey was. Mm-hmm. The way I understand it, Dean Dodrell was like first an animator, an illustrator, an artist. That was sort of his main area, and then said, "Hey, I'm going to jump in and learn how to code because I want to make a game."
And the art's gorgeous.
I mean, yeah, the art is gorgeous. Everything is hand drawn.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
Everything's hand painted. Everything is just gorgeous aesthetic. Great music, though that wasn't necessarily Dodrell's own doing. I think soundtrack and voice acting were things that were added. Mm-hmm. Voice acting, soundtrack were added outside of Dodrell's contributions, but 90% or something of this game was made by one person. So when you get a person who's just brainchild is this story, yeah, it actually stands up pretty damn well, considering most of these other one-person projects that we get access to are not this fleshed out. Is the story a little bit storybooky, a little bit tropey? Yeah, but it's also one person.
And if you compare it to something like, Charles Barkley's Shut Up and Jam Gaiden, I mean, this thing is light years ahead of it. Like, it's not even in the same ballpark. And I mean, both of them really are single-person passion projects.
We played a couple other games that were really small dev teams. I'm trying to think of some other games we played that were really small dev teams.
Was Devil Daggers?
The Witness.
Witness
was made, I think, by a really, really small dev team. Now, that game was entirely puzzles and beauty, so that makes a little more sense.
Yeah.
But this game had action, platforming, intense combat,
a lot of elements,
story,
sure.
A lot of elements. So, does any piece stand out story-wise as being particularly good? No, but I think the story does what it needs to do. I think it gets us from one piece of cool action or cool art to the next, and it gives us some reason to kind of be invested. Yeah, the Two Souls thing, the Dust thing, it's a little bit fairy tale, but look, this is a fairy tale. It's an Elysian Tale. So
nice, good work there.
I'm just trying to be a little bit charitable, because if we're going to ask the game to provide compelling, like, social narrative or, like, cultural criticism, like, we're asking in the wrong place for that.
Yeah, I mean, and this, I want to support your decision, Billy, I do, because I think it's fair, it's charitable, it's sort of the right way to read this game, but I don't know if criticism in general can sustain those sort of distinctions, where, like, you can really only evaluate the product there. Once you start importing questions of authorship, development, even these sort of economic questions, it's going to undermine overall critical analysis. So while from, like, a charitable, like, just in terms of video game enjoyment and appreciating all the hard work this guy put in, absolutely, I support the things you're saying. But if we want to look at this just as critical and cultural theorists, I don't know that we can start importing some of this information.
Now I have to backtrack on myself, because I'm one of the biggest proponents of examining games as cultural artifacts, and if we're going to do that, if we're going to examine this game 30 years from now next to another game under similar development circumstances, we're not going to have this context.
Yeah.
So,
now, one thing it can tell us is about sort of the state of one-man developing units at a point in history, right? And it's useful insofar as it does that.
It is.
But if we're asking just sort of about the artifact itself, this context is exterior to that.
Right.
I mean, Derrida would disagree, but let's not bring Derrida into it.
No. What can one person accomplish with, like, a coding language and a dream?
Yeah, just some basic tools, sure.
What we had was fantastic art, fantastic visuals, everything's hand-painted, cohesive combat, all the guts were there. What were added on afterwards were things like, maybe not afterwards, but were separate from the game making, was story writing, and I got to be careful. I don't want to separate game making and story writing too much, because I think those two things can be intertwined and inseparable when done correctly.
But, there is a distinction.
There is a distinction.
Sure.
There are component pieces before the final product is made.
Mm-hmm.
From a story writing perspective, yeah, it was left wanting a little bit. Voice acting was great. Music was great. I had no problems there. I think really just the story and some of the combat mechanics being too broken or overpowered to create a real challenge. Was it fun? Yes. Was there missing a bit of challenge? Yes. So if I had to point out two areas where I think the game could have done better if it had a full development team, a full writing team, it would be a little bit spicier combat, a little bit more compelling story. But overall, this game was a fuck ton of fun for me to play. I 100%ed it, and I would definitely consider this game again, playing this game again, and I would definitely enjoy playing it on harder difficulty settings, because I think that's where the game actually is balanced appropriately for the right level of challenge and fun.
I think you're right about the difficulty settings. I will just make sort of one final point, though, that it doesn't really take much, it doesn't take any effort at all to not make your mud people Southern. Like, that's a decision that has nothing to do with development teams, right? Resources, anything like that.
You're right.
And I think those are the sort of decisions you can take issue with in this game.
Yeah, if you don't like the characterization of some of the people, if you don't like the tones that the sort of, I guess, do I say racist? No, it's more like
No, I wouldn't.
speciest.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
wouldn't even go
specious
that
tones.
far. It's just a little unsavory. Like, I wouldn't accuse these of any sort of, like, prejudicial overtones. I would just say, like, listen, it's a decision that didn't have to be made, and you need to be aware of the context in which it's being made. It's the same thing, like, when you think about, like, the stories based around... See, like, there's a difference between the issue I take with making the characters Southern versus the issue of hinging the large part of your plot with a genocide. Right? That's something that would be difficult to handle within the confines of a game of this size and structure. So I don't necessarily find that at fault, right? That's just sort of the dynamic he's chosen, and he executed to the best of his ability. It would have taken more resources, more manpower to make a larger narrative around that large issue, right? But the Southern thing, small, easily fixed, no real effort.
Yeah. It didn't bug me as much, but it's mostly because when I hear or I see a character from a story and they have maybe an accent for some reason, they're trying to invoke some other emotion, I just sort of take it as that's what the storyteller's trying to do. Let's flash it back to like Oddworld Stranger's Wrath, like the southern chickens, like that was just like slapstick making fun of an accent and making people sound stupid and using an accent to do that. That I have a problem with. But I think this was more of just trying to add a layer of flavor, maybe choosing the wrong way to do it.
All right, I think that's a reasonable argument, but I do think you're cheating that you used Odd Man Stranger's Wrath as your point of comparison.
Because, yeah, that was so egregious.
I mean, that's
basically straw man argument.
Yeah.
Anything beats that.
But I see what you're saying.
Okay. Well, I do want to highlight one other cool little piece of the game. I don't know if you explored this that much, Pete, but did you unlock the special treasure chest that had four keys to open?
The friend chest?
You got your friends? Yeah.
Yeah, I got a couple of them.
Yeah, so if you get all of them, there's a good bit, and I really enjoyed these friend chests. All you do is go to a secret part of the world to find these friend chests. There's little notes that get given to you at certain points of the game, like right before a boss, like a couple rooms before the boss room of a level, you might stumble across like a note, and it'll give you a hint to go somewhere in the world and do something, and your reward is going to be finding one of these special chests. These special chests are located off the beaten path, really hard to get to, sometimes require a special item to do so, but a couple of these characters are from other cool indie games.
Yeah.
We see the kid from Bastion as one of the characters. We see like Super Meat
Boy. Yeah, I got him.
We see the dude from Spelunky.
There's one of the
Ducks?
Donald Duck's nephews?
No, it's from some other game. I can't remember the name of the game.
Yeah, some duck with headphones.
I'm gonna look it up real quick so I properly know this. And the only actual in-game purpose is...
It's like a health bonus, right?
It's like a health bonus.
Yeah. It's not even that much, really.
Mm-hmm. It's Hyperduck from Hyperduck Soundworks.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. You've got Spelunky character, Super Meat Boy, Hyperduck Soundworks, Dead Samurai characters, Fez characters, Braid characters, it is awesome, fantastic inclusion of little indie characters, but not only that, Dodgerill included elements of their games. He recreated little vignettes of their games. So when you go find the Bastion character, little tiles rise up from nothingness like they do in Bastion. And when you go find the character from Braid, as you move, time goes, but when you stop, it freezes around you. And what is it? There was another one where the whole world is chopped up into a 4-section tic-tac-toe grid. It's like you take the screen, chop it up into tic-tac-toe, and then mix them all up. Okay. So you have to keep track of what part of the screen you're actually on, and it was fantastic. So
nice. That's a nice little in-group touch.
Yeah, it was just like it would just like adapt to like every other indie developer, like just like a little fist bump across the board to the whole indie developer squad. Like, hey, I'm also an indie developer, and I really like your guys' games too, so I'm gonna just kind of like shout out
nice.
to
I like
all your
that.
characters, and I was also gonna give us just a passive health bonus. Fantastic, loved it. That was the last thing that I wanted to highlight about Dust and Elysian Tale. Do you have any other overarching points you want to hit?
No. I mean, I think we hit pretty much the most important things. It's a solid game.
Definitely solid. I would definitely recommend purchasing, especially if it goes on sale on Steam. This game caught some attention because I think it was originally slated to be just like released on like an Xbox download
like marketplace
store,
or something?
like a marketplace game, and then it actually caught some traction in development. Like people got to play demos of it, and it caught some momentum, and then it ended up getting released on a more formal Xbox arcade format, or I can't remember which of the two. It's either marketplace or arcade. That's like a bigger version, but it got upgraded in its release, and then it caught some really nice attention for its art style, for its primarily one man per production team. So I think it got a little bit lucky in its release, not in a bad way, but like it caught some really nice wind behind its sails.
Yeah, I mean,
it led to a much better
game
result.
Takes luck if it wants to succeed.
Definitely.
I mean, I'll say it's a game worth playing. It's a solid game, but if you want to, like, if you like Metroidvania and you want to play Metroidvania, just play Valda's Story. I mean, it's good. It's not Valda's Story good.
You right.
But what is,
You right. All right, that's going to wrap it up for me. Closing thoughts on Dust. We already kind of hit that.
Yeah,
so since Gino stepped out because his phone died, I'm going to hit the closing points.
His phone didn't really die. He got so tired while he was cycling, he passed out on the floor. I mean, we didn't want to say it, but I think you as our listeners should know he's fine. He's soft, and we'll all have to accept that.
It's okay.
Yeah.
We can't all have muscle definition like you, Pete.
That's true.
But we all have goals to aspire, and I gotta respect Gino for trying to reach his.
Yeah, I mean, he's put in the work. What more can you ask?
Definitely. So, what's coming up next on Deep Listens? First things first, Gino did communicate to us from the floor of the yoga studio in which he was cycling that that the next game that he is picking is Stanley Parable. Cool title. One that has been on my list a little bit further down, just because I don't know much as much about it, but I'm a little bit hyped to play it.
Yeah, I'm excited. It seems like a really interesting sort of game. A little different, maybe, let's say, in the vein that Gino's picks usually are.
Not so far off of from relevant topics, though. This game is also very narrative and narrator focused, not unlike Bastion, which is a game that I will be playing for the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run, which is also happening the weekend of May 5th, 6th, and 7th.
Very nice. Coming up soon. So, to all you listeners, just so you are aware, hit up the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run. This is an event which happens each year. It's raising money for Pencils of Promise, an organization which builds schools, trains teachers, and sends kids to schools in developing nations. This year, I believe, great cause.
The efforts of Pencils of Promise are going to be focusing on Guatemala, Ghana, and Laos. I believe those are the three nations. I'm going to fact check that while I keep going. But Gino and I will be racing 2 video games. I will be playing Bastion. Gino will be playing Final Fantasy V. And we're going to be racing. Now, Bastion is a good bit shorter than Final Fantasy V. But you, listeners, and anyone else who may be catching wind of this event can help Gino. Any money donated towards Gino's donation page will allow him to improve his play. He's doing a 4-job fiesta, where in Final Fantasy V he will slap a piñata until a random Final Fantasy V job falls out, and he's stuck with that one until he unlocks new jobs, and he'll be stuck with a second one, and the third one, and a fourth one, and he'll only get 4 jobs ever in Final Fantasy V. Enough donations will allow Gino to re-roll one of those jobs should he get stuck with a terrible one. So that will help Gino on his run. Conversely, donations to my personal donation page, the Billy Rothert donation page, will make my Bastion run more difficult. It will make me have to use idols. Also, I will be restricted with what weapons I get to use in Bastion. Any donation of $5 or more will either in real time have me spin a wheel of weapons that make me choose what loadout I have to go into the levels with, which could be hilarious and terrible all at the same time. And any donation up until the start of the live event will count as like a banked cache of Gino to have like charges of use to make me spin the wheel. So it's either going to be live or Gino's going to have like shots of wheel spinning to throw at me whenever he sees fit. So I'm going to have many, many obstacles in my way towards the end, but that's not all. And this is one of the first times that I'm announcing this. I just put it up on my donation page today, but our friends at Supergiant Games released sheet music for the game Bastion for free on their website. I have learned how to play a couple songs from the game, and I have put donation incentives in my donation page that I will live perform on keyboard with vocals. Build That Wall, which is Zia's theme, and Mother I'm Here, which is Zolf's theme, maybe even a couple other songs, but those are the 2 that I have slated right now. So more donations could result in me stopping immediately my playthrough and having like a live musical performance.
Listeners, you've never heard Billy sing, but let me assure you, worth every penny, this donation.
So, I'm sure that Gino, when he posts the podcast, will include links to all the respective donation pages. Mm-hmm. You can check out Pencils of Promise. It is a fantastic cause. Go check out Giant Bomb and the specific event that we are doing, the Giant Bomb Community Endurance Run. Links for all that stuff will be in the description. It's going to be all over Gino and I's social media, so if you follow any of us, probably Pete too will throw out some social media love. Sure, I know y'all follow Pete.
Yeah. If you're Facebook friends with me, maybe you'll see it there.
Maybe. But other than that, that's all we got for this week's episode. If you want to get in touch with the podcast, hit us up at deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can hit us up on all of our social media at deeplistenspod. Also, check us out on our direct. We're basically up on every podcast hosting site, but our main one is deeplistens.libsyn.com, from what I understand. And do send us some comments, send us some feedback. We love to hear it. Go rate us on iTunes, all that good stuff.
Tell us more about the Brooklyn Nets, too. At this point, we're slowly drifting to a 50-50 basketball video game distribution, much to Billy's chagrin. But the more comments we get, the happier me and Gino are.
Yeah, I mean, God, I just want to put a fork in my eye when I hear about these Sixers and these money launderings, and I'm so out of context.
It's all right. You get it.
I mean, it's like hearing somebody talk about Doctor Who, and I don't know. I'm not caught up on any of the doctors. Anyway, that's all I have. Thank you so much, Pete.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in yet again.
Thanks, Gino. Moment of silence.
For our fallen leader.
And thank you, everybody. I'm going to sign us off tonight. So my name is Billy Rothard, a.k.a. Rothgar. Till next time, thanks for listening. Peace.